and welcome to our brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight we'll be focusing on a historic event in the history of Egypt, which is the 70th anniversary of the Police Day, which comes on the 25th of January of every year, marking what happened in the Ismailia battle in 1952. And today, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi marked this special occasion by honoring the families of the martyrs on the 70th anniversary of the Police Day at the Police Academy, honoring the families of the martyrs and saying that this is the fuel for development and progress for the future of the country. And to be shedding more light on such a historic event in the history of Egypt, I'm honored to be having with me over the Daily Debate for tonight Major General Hamdy Bekhit, the strategic analyst. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
You're quite welcome. Happy to be with you in your great program.
Thank you very much. We will be starting straight away with a report about what happened today during the ceremony attended by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, marking the 70th anniversary of the Police Day, which comes every year on the 25th of January, marking what happened in 1952 in the Battle of Ismailia.
دايما جاهزين دايما جاهزين
جاهزين
جاهزين احنا دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين في عهد ما بيننا يا بلدي وكلنا متفقين من اول يوم والاخر يوم واليوم الدين دايما جاهزين دايما جاهزين اطمني دايما اولادك يا بلدنا شباب وعيوننا بتسهر على راحتك وعلى استعداد دايما جاهزين ويا مصر اطمن وانت بتمشي في كل مكان انا
عيد الشرطة 70 عاما.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi attended the Ministry of Interior's celebration of the 70th National Police Day, which is commemorated every year on the 25th of January. Senior police commanders and state officials attended the event, which was held at the headquarters of the Police Academy in New Cairo. Minister of Interior Mahmoud Tawfiq welcomed the president upon his arrival at the academy. The event started with a documentary that featured personal testimonies of pride by the families and children of police officers who were killed in the line of duty. The film included personal testimonies of commitment and resilience from police officers who were gravely injured in the fight against terrorists in Sinai. President al-Sisi delivered a speech marking this glorious day, saying that this day brings back the memories of freedom, pride, and patriotism. He added that this day commemorates the sacrifices of the police heroes who proved that defending their country did not solely depend on having arms and munition, but bravery and their belief in themselves. He reiterated that preserving the nation from destruction would not happen without a strong national police force, adding that Egypt's police forces have proved their steadfastness in fighting terrorism and keeping the order of law. At the end of his speech, the president saluted all policemen and forces for their efforts over the past years and paid tribute to the souls of the police martyrs. During the ceremony, a documentary was aired which reviewed the efforts of the Interior Ministry in training police officers and maintaining their level of preparedness in the field, as well as the expansive efforts of the ministry's civil divisions in the provision of various documentation and services to the citizens. The National Police Day marks resistance by Egyptian police to British occupation forces' attack on police station in Ismailia city on the Suez Canal on the 25th of January 1952, which resulted in the martyrdom and injury of dozens of police officers.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate. Major General Hamdy Bekhit, thank you very much once again for being with us tonight on a very special occasion in the history of Egypt. Focusing on the ceremony attended by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, what does that represent for the police forces and for the Egyptians as well?
I think this represents a lot for both the police department, national forces, and Egyptian people at the same time. For the police, it gives them a lot of self-confidence and appreciation for all the jobs and establishments they are doing and carrying out to help the security of the nation and the vital targets and the main life of the Egyptians inside and outside the country, because they have departments which are concerned with the outside. At the same time, for the people, it's a kind of complementation for these forces for the performance they are doing, and they gave through these years since 2011, and how they suffered a lot till they gained and regained themselves again and restored their capabilities and restored the security of the street. So they went through many competitions. They went through many challenges, and at the same time they could prove themselves as security forces and can help keeping the national security of Egypt, especially in the interior area, on its order. At the same time, it gives a kind of harmony between the people and their police forces, and I wish this harmony extends for a longer time, and we appreciate this touch from the President that gave us today to clear up how far this organization is representing a kind of power to help with national security in Egypt.
In order to be looking ahead for the future, we need to be looking at the past as well, what happened on the 25th of January in 1952, or the Battle of Ismailia. How do you see such heroic acts that took place in 1952, and therefore we celebrate the police forces every day on the 25th of January?
What happened in the 25th of January 1952 was a kind of enforcing the power of the occupation in Egypt. The British thought that when they occupy the governorate of Ismailia by that time, they can control the area of the Suez Canal, and they can run the facilities up there as they want to do it. But at the same time, the Egyptian forces up there, soldiers and commanders, I think they could recognize that this is a violation and occupation for a government facility, which was the governorate of Ismailia. And so this is why they refused the alarm once and twice and for 3 times to stick holding to their position and protect the facility. The British were mad enough to shoot guns and all kind of weapons, mortars, and to burn the building, and they killed about 30 marshals and wounded about 80 people, and this was most of the people who were running this facility. And from that day, Egypt is celebrating that day as the Police National Day, and that started since Mubarak era, who decided to make this day the National Day of the Police in Egypt.
Yes, as we looked to the past, we looked with a sense of belonging, pride and patriotism by the people, as you mentioned, Major General Hamdy Bekhit, that there were more than 80 or 100 people inside the governmental facility and protected the facility with their lives. How can we be transmitting the same spirit of the people in Ismailia in 1952, or the martyrs of the police forces in 1952 on the 25th of January, to the younger generations that we have nowadays, especially that the type of war has changed?
The threats always competitive and developed from time to time, from era to era, and taking more than unknown number of threats and kinds. So this is why these generations who could absorb all the values from the old generations could have the right thinking about their jobs and their responsibility. Now the threats are completely different. We are fighting terrorism, we are fighting in unconventional kind of crimes, money laundering and drugs trafficking, and a lot of these threats that are directed to kill and destroy the youth of our country and the facilities of our country, even the future of our country. So this is why these generations could learn the lesson well. Now we find that the police departments all over the country had the capabilities and the sophisticated technology to face these threats and treat with it as in a competitive way. And we could recognize it's not far how they could fight a lot of battles against the terrorism in Sinai and inside the country.
Yes.
And they occupied and destroyed all their bases, and even the casualties was higher and was painful enough for the Egyptian families and the police departments or the Department of Interiors. But at the same time, you can feel this is a duty. We can do it from time to time, and even and especially when the country is threatened by these elements. And now the threats are completely different. As I told you, it's unconventional. The police was before was facing a usual breaking of the law and security inside the streets and outside the cities and in the villages, and something like that.
Yes.
But now they are facing international criminal organizations that work in drug trafficking and money laundering, as I told you, and terrorism and killing people and destroying vital targets. So this is why we could take it as a target to develop and make a kind of advanced equipment for the police and its departments to face such threats.
How do you see the efforts of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to be honoring the families of the martyrs and the martyrs themselves, the names of the martyrs, and specifically after 2014 and 2013 and the threats and the challenges that we've had with terrorism and different challenges here in the country?
As the target was to destroy the police forces in Egypt by many intelligence departments all over the world, which concerns that Egypt wouldn't exist without security forces, without armed forces. And we can take the example from Iraq, when Bremer, the governor of Iraq, the American governor of Iraq, his first step in Iraq was to disarm the army and disseminate the police forces and intelligence capabilities. And so till today, we can't find that Iraq could restore itself again. So this is why we could recognize that threat that they were going to destroy the police forces and try to make a kind of challenge between the military forces and police forces and the people themselves in the streets. So the conspiracy was clear that we could recognize it. Many countries
was a plan, a clear
couldn't.
Plan.
It was a plan to disseminate the country and make it regions to fight each other day and night and
to divide it easily.
So this is why Egypt could face this challenge by restoring the police forces in a very short time between 2013 and 2015. We could restore a lot of many facilities and police departments and stations to face their responsibility in restoring peace and security and settlement in the streets.
Major General Hamdy Bekhit, you mentioned that what happened on the 25th of January in 2011 was a clear plan for Egypt and for the neighboring regions as well to be fighting the police, the army,
and fighting each other.
And the country in general, to be fighting the whole country in general. So how did you see the rebound of the police forces, of the armed forces, of the army of Egypt in 2011 and more specifically in 2013 as well, after the fall of the Terrorist Brotherhood organization?
Yeah, fortunately we had a powerful and disciplined armed forces by that time, which could lead the situation in the street and could gain security, especially securing the vital targets and the street and the airports and seaports. The armed forces could play a very important role by that time, till we could regain the armed, the police forces once again. So this moment or this period of time was very critical because, you know, prisons were broken, and many criminals, especially the political criminals, got out from it and spread all over the country. Number two, all the police stations, most of it were burned and destroyed. Even they were killing the officers in a very violent way to deal with those soldiers and officers. It was a crime by all the aspects we can consider. At the same time, we could find that these gangs and organizations were completely supported from outside the country and from inside the country with with organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood and some Salafist organizations. It was the aim to destroy all the main departments that control the peace and security in Egypt. But we could recognize the lesson by taking the role of the police by the armed forces for a while. Then when we restored the security in the street and all over the country, we could work on getting back our police forces to play that role. Now we can see that police forces are in their best occasion, in their best condition, in their best capabilities, in their best sufficiency. And so this is why they can play this role inside. And you know, we have an idea that says that the armed force couldn't stay for a long time in the street. We can stay for a month, for a year, but not for a long time.
Yes.
So this is why we could recognize the lesson by restoring our police forces to play their roles in having security and settlement in the country.
Yes, the role of control which was taken out by or taken under by the armed forces in 2011 and 2013, and of course afterwards, this means that there is also love between the armed forces and the people of Egypt. It's not just about the armed forces controlling the country. There was a relationship, a cooperation between the people of Egypt and the armed forces that was so evident in 2011, 2013, and up till now.
I think I'm the person who can speak about this area because I was occupying a position as the director of crisis management and disaster center of the armed forces. And I had a lot of cooperation with the police forces and those who are working in that area for many crises, collapsing buildings, collapsed buildings and fires and whatever.
Yes.
We could find a kind of harmony and kind of cooperation and coordination between our forces who are working in the crisis or on the disaster and the police forces who are working with us. At the same time, we can see that there are many occasions and many responsibilities that couldn't be acted or performed by the police forces only. They have to be supported by the armed forces. See how many patrols are going all over the streets in Egypt. They are covering a very good area of security and peace and settlement in the streets and all over the country. So this is made by cooperation between the armed forces and you see we have exchanged visits for the commanders in the armed forces and the police forces commanders. They come to see us and visit us. We visit them. At the same time, many conferences of coordination of security for any activity or facility. You find the armed forces with the police forces together, taking briefing and coordinating the missions all over the area of the event. So cooperation between the armed forces and the police forces in Egypt wouldn't end. It extends for a long time.
The support that was given to the Brotherhood terrorist organization, to the other outer forces, if we can call them that, has it stopped ever since 2013, 2014?
To dry the routes of supply to the gangs of terrorism, it needs to isolate them from material support, money support, intelligence support, information support. If you could isolate them from these kinds of support, you can take them as a very weak elements, couldn't have a decision or make a decision on the ground.
Yes.
So this is why the target or the objective was to isolate these elements in the area of operations inside the country, and even in some special areas like what happened in Sinai. So this is not the mission of the police only, it's the mission of the armed forces also, especially from the sea area and from the borders area and seaports, airports. You can find a combined missions carried out by the police forces and the armed forces.
Yes.
Same time, you can have a look on how far the intelligence community is working with the police forces, and part of it, the military intelligence community, who are helping and working in coordination with the police forces and police security departments. So the coordination wouldn't stop, and the threats are taking and compulsing us to face these threats with this coordination. Even if we couldn't have such coordination, I think we could have many weak points and penetration points. So this is why this cooperation and coordination is important.
Yes, the sense of patriotism and heroism that we can see with the police forces and the armed forces, do you think that this is getting to the younger generations as well, as we did see in the past? Ramadan, Al-Ikhtiyar too, or the choice too, and the previous one was the choice one for the armed forces, one for the police forces. The tales and the heroic actions and fighting terrorism, do you think that they are getting through to the younger generations quite well now?
I think these artistic works that shows the patriots and courage and capabilities of the armed forces and police forces to face the threats, especially terrorism, and when we were fighting against Israel while before 1973 wars, and that shows the generation after generation how far their fathers and their godfathers were very, very solid soldiers, and they could carry out a complicated missions that helped us to have the national security of Egypt completely secured. And that is transferred to the generations that coming up through the military colleges and military institution in all its branches. So we find Rangers forces and airborne forces, and those special forces can find a kind of emotion to help them carry out their mission in a perfect way and in a high sufficiency. So this is why these actions and these artistic works can help these generations to be more courage and more ready and more prepared and more highly moral to face all the threats that facing the country.
Yes, and mentioning the fathers and the grandfathers, we will be having more information about the Battle of Ismailia in 1952.
This is the same thing. When you recognize the Battle of Ismailia, you recognize how far this generation could fight with the very primitive weapons against the British forces with their guns and mortars, and it was unbelievable comparison between the two fighting forces. It's a lesson because the will of the soldier is playing the active role.
Yes, exactly. We'll be having more details about the Battle of Ismailia in 1952, which took place on the 25th of January, and we celebrated every year now the 70th anniversary of the Police Day. We'll be having more information about this battle in the upcoming report.
The day January 25th marks multiple important incidents that the country had witnessed over the past 70 years. The day marks a historic clash between Egyptian police forces and the British occupation forces in 1952, which was called then Ismailia Battle. It took place when the Egyptian police officers refused to hand over their weapons and evacuate the Ismailia Governorate's building. The incident left 50 police martyrs and 80 injured. The massacre was the spark of the revolution that ended the monarchy in Egypt on July 23rd on the same year. A few months before the incident, the armed struggle against the British camps and soldiers culminated, resulting in huge losses for the British occupation. After the clashes were over, those who survived from the Egyptian officers were captured by the British forces. As a result, protests broke out across Cairo, calling up for intensifying the armed struggle against the British colonization, whose troops withdrew completely from Egypt in June 1956. Since then, the day became a national day in Ismailia Governorate. It comes also to coincide with the January 25th revolution that took to the streets in 2011. January 25th has since been deemed as an official holiday, marking the revolution as well as Police Day.
دايما جاهزين دايما جاهزين
جاهزين
جاهزين احنا دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين
دايما جاهزين في عهد ما بينا يا بلدي وكلنا متفقين من أول يوم والآخر يوم واليوم الدين دايما جاهزين دايما جاهزين اطمني دايما أولادك يا بلدنا جداد وعيوننا بتسهر على راحتك وعلى استعداد دايما جاهزين ويا مصر في ظهر وانت بتمشي في كل مكان.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate and always ready, as the song said, on the 70th anniversary of the Police Day, marked by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and meeting with the families of the martyrs. As we did see in the past report, the historic background of the Ismailia battle in 1952 on the 25th of January, and that's why we keep celebrating the heroic acts of the martyrs in Ismailia in 1952 and up till this day. Major General Hamdy, Bekhit, of course, we know that the police forces they fight against terrorism and the challenges are different every day, but they also have a role in the Decent Life Initiative. How do you see the role of the police forces in different fields of life in Egypt, not just the security one?
I think the mission of the Interior Department is to cover all the missions and all the responsibilities of securing the country inside and from outside if it was necessary. And so this is why by that time, as I told you, the threats has become more complicated than before. Even we call it unconventional. It's not conventional as before. Now you can find the threats coming up from the streets while you are walking in a moment. The ignition of an accident comes in a moment in the street. Yes. It was not before. But now, as the community is getting advanced and moderated and have many facilities, and so the crime has been developed, and at the same time the heads of these gangs has their methodology. Even they have scientific sections to cover up what their needs are, to help them. As we see, from 2 days or 3 days, the Russian could assault a center of cyber warfare. Those who are making billions of dollars, threatening the national and international companies by using their database. So this crime was not before. It's unconventional crime and modern crime. So this is why the police has its kinds of verification kinds of departments that face these kinds of crimes. At the same time, qualification of the officers and soldiers and those who are working on security fields has become more sophisticated and developed. At the same time, the equipment and the advanced technology they use. So all the departments of the Interior Department or the police department has become now a kind of a coordinated cell that work all over the country, and as I told you, maybe outside if it was necessary. But at that time, you can find that inside it's a complicated threats. It comes from no time, from unexpected place, from unexpected persons. So this is why their effort could be verified and spreading all over the facilities and activities and the roles of many companies and ministers and persons. So I think that the role of the police, the national police of Egypt, has become more complicated than before, and has its many kinds of branches that deal with the crime with its verification. So it's a matter of complicated mission that they carry out by that time.
You've also mentioned the very important point, the qualification of the police officers and the staff nowadays. How has it changed? Because we can see under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, he goes to the tests at 5 a.m., for example, at the police academy. How can this enhance the process of qualification of the police officers in the future?
I think the qualification is not a kind of physical fitness only. It's a kind of scientific way and scientific researches and scientific thinking and technological applications and coordination between the branches in a specific crime, it has become a kind of innovation and creation. You can say that.
Yes.
It's a kind of innovation and creation. To find a sophisticated person or sophisticated department that face these elements who are threatening the national security. So it's not a matter of preparing a person himself. No, it's preparing his mind, his thinking, his talent, his way of acting or performance in the field. So this is what we could see it completely reflected in the celebration now or today.
Yes.
I think it gives us more confidence about the police forces comparing or considering the current kinds of threats and crimes.
Yes, one of the statements made by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi today, and a very important issue in Egypt nowadays is the human rights, because he mentioned that the police forces should be keeping the character of Egypt and safeguarding the character of the country without interfering in the affairs of others. What does this say to the outer world, because they seem overly interested in the human rights in Egypt?
I think this is a complicated issue to consider the human rights while practicing your mission against the criminals. But it's important. The law is the law. Constitution is the Constitution. We can't break through any one of them. We can't penetrate each one of them. So this is why we have to be alert while dealing with the people. Not all the people criminals. They are suspected. Some of them are suspected.
Yes.
But not all of them are. And they are suspected until they prove that they are criminals. So we need in our culture of security to develop this area. And this is important. Some people are suffering from some violation that happens from some persons who are not disciplined enough to carry out their mission under pressure or under complicated circumstances. So this is why we have to raise an alarm to both the people in the street, at the same time to police forces to take care of this area, because we are completely watched from the others to find some kind of penetration against us concerning the human rights. And now we could make some very considerable steps. You see the new prisons, like the new prison of Natron and Elminia, and we could develop and moderate the life in these prisons, and at the same time the police stations were completely developed.
Yes.
We are doing something, but we need more.
Yes, as we need more, we did see the ritual of President al-Sisi meeting with the families of the martyrs today and in the past years, and speaking with the children and the widows of the martyrs of the police forces. How do you see this ritual and the importance for the children for now and the future of Egypt?
The families of martyrs is a symbol of sacrifice and giving to the country. Some of them gave their father, their brothers, their sons, and it's a very complicated feeling and very sadful feeling. When you see a family without a father or
Yes.
and losing a brother, these families are hurted enough to be in need for someone to touch on their hairs and say good word and carry out all their needs. And so the families of marshals should have, and they are, having a big concern from the country, materialistic concern and social affairs concern. And I'm one of those who are concerned about this issue. No event I could invited to participate in it you know, for these families, and
Yes.
I can't neglect my role to go there and
Yes.
meet them and speak to them and find, and I can touch a lot of concern of the country and measurements taken by the country to help them on their new life. Those are the symbol of sacrifice and giving the country blood and sheds and blood and souls and many things. So they deserve a lot of concern of the political command and from the people themselves and the non-governmental organization. This is a role, a big role, and parties. But the parties should have a big role.
The political
in
parties.
that, the political parties, of course.
Yes.
This is the responsibility of all the society, because they died defending this society to live and continue.
Yes. On the other hand, how do you see, in the past 7 years, you mentioned that the threats have changed, the challenges have changed over the years, and more specifically after the fall of the terrorist Brotherhood organization in 2013. What is the biggest danger now and the biggest enemy for Egypt nowadays?
From my own viewpoint, I would see that alertness. Alertness is the most important thing in our country, because if you have the people alert, they can defend all the threats, especially the modern threats, which are playing on our minds, on our souls, on our emotions.
Yes.
So this is why we should be alert enough to face that. And alertness is the responsibility of many institutions in the country.
Yes.
It starts from the family, the school, the college, the non-governmental organization, as I told you, and the political parts, and the media, which is very important to play that active role to raise the attention and the alertness of the people against all these threats. This is my viewpoint about these threats, new threats, the unconventional threats. They are coming from unexpected ways to find yourself trusting liars and trusting unconventional ways to penetrate the personality and give them whatever they have of poisons and bad thoughts, and now it's information war. It's not the gun and the tank
And do we have this awareness?
Awareness. We need more awareness. We need more. We need more. As far as we are aware, as far we can face all these kinds of threats.
Yes, Major General Hamdy Bekhit, the strategic expert. Thank you very much for being with us.
You're quite
tonight
welcome.
on the Daily Debate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight, as we focused on the 70th anniversary of the Police Day and the ceremony that took place in the attendance of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, honoring the names and the families of the martyrs of the police forces in the past. And as we mentioned that the 25th of January marks a very important event in the history of the country in 1952, which was the Ismailiyah battle, and we had more information about that in the reports of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching and goodbye. Merci جدا.